about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. And welcome back to another That's Like WSUD episode, where we take a concept that we've heard about, read about, or otherwise come across, and relate it back to water-sensitive urban design. Today's concept comes from a recent episode of the Tim Ferriss Show with Frank Blake, who was once the CEO of Home Depot Center. So big hardware chain, very successful organization in the United States for sure, possibly in other countries as well, but in the US for sure. And in the interview with Tim Ferriss, he makes a comment along the lines of that what you should be aiming for. And he says that this is actually a quote attributed to someone else, or the concept attributed to someone else, but he couldn't remember who it was. So I'm attributing it to him. What he says is that what you should really be after with anything in life or business is to get to the simplicity that's on the other side of complexity. And so what he means by that is that you come to a task or an idea and you know that you really understand it or have it nailed or have got it done and got it right when you've reached an elegant and simple outcome, but you've been through complexity to get there. Not a case of, oh, I started thinking about this and I came up with a really simple answer and that's it. But a case of, okay, I really had to struggle with this, I had to really nitty gritty work through it, and then eventually, at some point, it all became clear and all became simple, and that's the answer and that's the understanding that's right. Now this, for me personally, I can see its relevance to multiple aspects of life. And in this video, I will probably use some analogies from my previous land of competitive bike riding. But I think it has some real importance to us in water-sensitive urban design, because what I see us in at the moment is in the struggle phase in the middle of this. So let's take stormwater treatment objectives as an example here. When I look back on when those were first developed in our industry, I see a time of real optimism, a time of, yes, we've got this right. Oh, look, it's such a simple idea. We've got this music model, we've got these objectives. People are going to do that. They're going to come along with their development. We're going to have these objectives they have to meet. They're going to stick it in this model here. They're going to use it to work out what they need to build, and they're going to implement it there. And because everyone wants a great outcome, we're going to build a really great thingy on the ground there. And sweet, we'll have protected our waterways and everything will be perfect. But the reality is, that was the oversimplistic view of things. That was the simplicity before complexity. What we've seen over the past 7, 8 more years is the complexity arise and the challenge arise in the situation, as we've been like, wait, we're not getting good assets on the ground. Wait, how do we build them? How do we this? How do we that? And it feels to me that's just got more and more bound up and all over itself. So what can this concept teach us that's actually applicable in water-sensitive urban design? It's all well and good to recognize that there might be some similarities here, but what can it actually teach us to apply forward? Well, for that to make sense, I'm going to use an analogy for me at a bike riding. So I used to compete in the sport of bike trials, where you ride a bike over obstacles like rocks and logs, concrete pipes, really anything that you feel that you can ride a bike over. And fundamentally it's hard. Yes, because it's a sport, there's athleticism involved, but fundamentally what it is figuring out just how precisely you can move your body in unison with a bike to get that bike to do useful things. And one of the first skills you need to learn in trials is to hop on the back wheel of the bicycle. Because if you've got 2 wheels on the ground, fundamentally you've got quite a few limitations as to how you move the bicycle around, because you always have 2 wheels pinned down. And you always need to be aware of where both wheels are, because either one of them can trip you up. But if you learn to hop on the back wheel of the bicycle, suddenly the bike is much taller and more maneuverable. You only have one point of contact to have to worry about on the ground. It opens up a whole world of trials riding. And if you see a video of a good trials rider just hopping around on the ground on the back wheel, it looks absolutely effortless. It looks really, really simple. But the learning phase to actually learn that, I feel there's a reason why this sport has not taken off in Australia. There's a few pockets in the world like France and Spain where it's, moderately popular, shall we say, but in Australia, it's not. And one of the reasons I think it hasn't taken off is that the barrier to entry to actually learn to back wheel hop is really high. It looks deceptively simple, but the complexity of actually learning to do it's really tough. But when you get through the other side, it is actually really, really simple once you've broken through the complexity and understand the movements there. The problem that I've confronted with this. And I'm using the back wheel hop as an example, but every move in trials faces the same problem. The problem here is that when you nut into this, you don't actually know how long the complexity phase is going to last for you. So unless you are essentially willing to go, look, because that person can do it, I believe that I can fundamentally get it right, therefore I'm willing to commit essentially unlimited time and resources to this in the belief that eventually it's going to pop open and get right. Because when you're in the complexity phase, it just feels like you're making no progress on the issue. You're just like, what the heck is going on? And that's a real problem. But in the trials running context here, it's not a complete problem, because at least you have someone sitting there who's done it and got it right. So you can be like, look, they've done it. Well, they've done it. So if I try hard enough and work on this in the right way, I at least have a model that I can see that I can do it. Water-sensitive urban design's a little bit different here, in the sense that while we have some inklings of what a water-sensitive city might look like, we don't actually have any water-sensitive cities to model off. So I see this situation where we've gone through this initial simplicity phase of, oh, we have stormwater objectives and they're going to make everything right, through to, oh my goodness, this is actually way tougher than we thought, and we're building lots of things that don't make great outcomes, though we are building some things that do, like recent episodes where we talked about bushland and bioretention systems and the like. But the point being, as we're doing this, unlike the trials riding rear wheel hopping example where someone has a role model that helps to give them the end point through the complexity, a problem we have with water-sensitive urban design at the moment is we don't actually have the end point. You can't actually look to any city around the world and be like, yeah, they got it, let's do it. We can look to cities around the world and go, oh, they're making a bit of good progress there. That's cool, that's inspiring, but we cannot look to anywhere in the world and be like, sweet, they've got it sorted, that's the goal, let's work really hard through our own complexity to get to that. And so that's a real challenge, because if you have this situation where, you know, I'm suggesting that in trials writing, that the complexity of the rear wheel hop is a high barrier to entry, even to people who have a goal sitting right in front of them, even to people who have come into the sport. And for example, when I've been riding for a while, and I'm riding with them, so I am in that instance the role model for them as to how to rear wheel hop, and they can literally see me right next to them at the time. There were many, many instances where that barrier to entry was just too high and people moved on to other things in their life. And that's actually okay, so long as they didn't have a desperate and dying need to learn to rear wheel hop a bicycle, which they probably didn't. Water-sensitive urban design, on the other hand, is a little bit more important than hopping a bicycle on its rear wheel. Water-sensitive urban design is about fundamentally making our cities and our urban areas sustainable. Much more important there. So then the question becomes, okay, how should we deal with this? My suggestion here is that what we need to do is to recognize that when in water-sensitive urban design we are coming up against this complexity, we're coming up against this, oh, how are we going to make this work? It didn't live up to our initial expectations. We need to make sure that we're not the person who gives up on the rear wheel hop, but we're the person who goes, you know what, I recognize that complexity and challenge is a fundamental part to solving this problem, and I need to keep working harder to get through it, to get to the more elegant and simple answer on the other side. And this could apply to all sorts of different aspects of water-sensitive urban design. In a recent Ideanthro episode, as part of our Front of Mind series, I was speaking to Emma James, and one of the topics we got onto is this continuing development of complexity through our cities. So you can think of the city water transition diagram from Rebecca Brown and others, where we go from a water supply city, and then we have a sewered city and a drain city, then we have a waterways city, and then eventually, hopefully, a water sensitive city. But in the process, every time we increase, or every time we add another layer to the city, we're adding more and more complexity, making the city tougher and tougher and tougher. At the macro level, I'd suggest here that one of the things that the water sensitive city should be aiming to be is incredibly elegant. So as in all these other stages, we've gone from a natural catchment with no human settlement to one with a human settlement with simply water supply. That's a little bit more complex in some respects anyway, at least for the humans trying to manage it, than the natural catchment. And then we've been like, oh, we need to drain the city, so we've added more complexity on top because you have water supply infrastructure and, sewer the city, and now sewer infrastructure. And then we've been like, wait, hang on, we need to drain the city as well. So we've had a drainage infrastructure over the top. And these things are getting more and more complex, more and more challenging to deal with. Then we've realized that actually the drainage is having an impact on our waterways, and we really like our waterways, they're really important. So then we need to start implementing water-sensitive urban design, which we've initially done with more complexity over the top. I think what we need to recognize here is that the goal should be this simplicity on the other side. It should be the point where as we're going through this, we're having expanding complexity, and it's getting tougher and tougher, and it's getting harder and harder, but we should recognize that the goal of the water-sensitive city should be to shrink this back down to simplicity. And as Frank says, coming back to the original statement, what you can really take away from this is that if you are still in the complexity phase of something, be it something in business, be it something in training, be it hopping a bike on the back wheel, or be it water-sensitive urban design, if you are in the complexity phase, that is not an indication that you should give up on the topic. In fact, it's simply an indication that you need to work longer and harder on it to search for that complexity. But the reality is, without the end goal having been found the first time, you don't know how long that's going to take. So it's an act of faith that you trust that you and the people that you work with will actually be able to get there in the long term. Because think about this. While I used the hopping on the back wheel of the bike analogy right throughout this conversation here, the reality is that someone had to learn that first. Someone had to figure that out first. Someone had to either do it by accident or be like, you know what? I reckon it'd be really cool if I could hop on the back wheel of a bicycle. And then they had to nut through that complexity with no idea if it was actually possible. And sometimes that will take a long time. Another example for me out of this bike riding analogy is there's another move in trials called a hook up, which essentially you ride an obstacle, jump up, hook the front wheel over the top of the obstacle, and then from there carry your momentum and bounce the whole bicycle up on top. I rode trials for 14 years. I never perfected that movement. It took me 10 years to get it in any way, shape or form correct. That was an incredibly frustrating experience. So don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we should all robotically be like, oh, sorry, it is a challenge. We must continue to work through the complexity. That's not my point here. By all means, it's going to be tough. It's going to be frustrating. We're going to have times where we lose motivation. But if we can come back to this guiding principle of, look, the goal is simplicity on the other side of complexity. It makes the complexity at least seem like something that is important for us to continue to work through. And it steers us away from the temptation to be like, you know what, it's too hard, let's go and do something else instead. So to finish this up, because the reality is this topic is, Frank explains this from the point of view of, and with the words simplicity on the other side of complexity. But this general theme pops up in a whole bunch of other forms. I've also heard this theme. I heard this first when I was back in high school, to be honest. Heard this theme explained as you only know something. You can only be certain that you really know something when you're able to explain it. When you've got so far into it. So you got a topic, you know nothing about it, so clearly you can't explain it. Then you learn it and you feel that you understand it, but you try and explain it to someone, you can't really explain it. But then, when you really delve deeper, when you get to the point where you can explain it, is when you know that you really understand it. It's again this kind of struggle phase where it's like, oh, I'm learning, no, not quite there, now I can explain it. But so the quote that I want to leave you with is one that I have heard recently from Ryan Holiday, although again it's not his, because what in this world is actually new, except a water-sensitive city when we get there. But it's this: the obstacle is the way. And what it means is the challenging thing, the obstacle, the thing that is in your path is the thing that you need to pursue to get things right. For me, sometimes that's as simple as, you know what, that email I've been ignoring that's making me feel really nervous is the thing I definitely need to deal with. But at a water-sensitive urban design level, the challenges of this and the challenges of the need to manage the impacts of urbanization upon our water cycle, as tough as they may be, as challenging, as much of an obstacle of dealing with that might be, the very fact that it is an obstacle makes it apparent and should guide us to the fact that it's the way we need to go and the thing we need to deal with. Okay, thank you for tuning in to that somewhat rambling bike and water related episode. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. We'll see you next time on Ideanthro.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro, improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.